a little link with them. So Rachel, I'll let you take it away.
Perfect. Well, first of all, thank you to everybody for being here. I'm just going to share the agenda quickly. Right now, I'm sure most of us are familiar with Zoom, but just to go over some basic ground rules, all of the participants are going to be muted throughout the presentation. And then when we get to the Q&A, after both DERM and Miami-Dade Parks have spoken, we will go ahead and unmute you after you raise your hand and ask a question. Additionally, if you would like to write something in the Q&A, we will go through all of those questions during the question and answer period as well. And then, of course, if we don't get to anything or you have any other follow-up concerns, please send me an email, and I will make sure that all of your questions are addressed after the webinar if need be. Right now, I'll just pass it off to Commissioner Higgins, and then we'll get into the presentation.
All right, well, I just thought I welcomed everyone, but I'll welcome you again. Hi, everybody, particularly for all our beach lovers. I just thought we had a lot of questions after the Army Corps finished its hotspot project on beach renourishment. And I thought it would be good if we got our parks team, and especially the director of DERM, Mr. Lee Hefty, here for you, so he can explain the other two phases of beach renourishment and how we're going to work to make sure there's plenty of sand throughout all of the rest of Miami Beach. So hi, everybody. And just in case your friends weren't able to attend, just let them know they can email our office. We'll put an email in the chat, and we'll send them a link to the information.
Okay, and can you all hear me? Okay, good afternoon and thank you. My name is Lee Hefty, Director of Miami-Dade County's Division of Environmental Resources Management. I want to talk a little bit about our beach renourishment program, and I like to start with this photograph. This photograph is off of a pamphlet that I've had for more than 30 years in my career at DERM. When I first started, I did the coral reef monitoring for beach renourishment, and the photo on the left is what our beaches looked like in the early 70s, and the photo on the right is what they look like soon after restoration. And of course, since then, we've planted dune systems and boardwalks, and it's developed quite a bit over almost 50 years. The beach program is actually a partnership between Miami-Dade County and the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a 50-year agreement for the Dade County Beach Erosion Control and Hurricane Protection Project, where we receive significant funding assistance from the federal government on the order of between 56 to 63% of project costs are paid for with federal dollars. The remaining non-federal share is usually split between the county and the state of Florida. And this is really important because beach renourishment is very expensive and you're never really done with it. As you do these projects, what ends up happening is wind and wave energy immediately starts to act on the newly restored beaches, changes the profile, and the beaches require constant upkeep. And it's a partnership not only between the county and the feds and the state, but also within the county, the various departments. DERM is responsible for doing the renourishment, but the county's Parks, Recreation, and Open Spaces Department is the one that's really the custodian of the beaches on a daily basis. They keep the beaches clean and manicured, and that's what really drives our local economy. We put the sand there to protect all the infrastructure. The Parks Department brings the beauty to the beach that actually drives our economic value from it. So it's a long-standing relationship that we have with the Corps. We are actually nearing the end of our first 50 years. And about a year or so ago, we initiated a reauthorization request with the federal government. So it's currently under a study. The federal government is looking at the feasibility of extending this project into the future. We hope for another 50 years because we would like to maintain that partnership with the federal government because they do bring such significant resources. And as I mentioned, cost share, we normally pay anywhere from, I think it's 37 to 43% of the project costs. Something significant happened in 2018. The Bipartisan Budget Act approved by Congress actually dedicated $158 million for beach renourishment in Dade County. it was a significant. There were projects all over the country, but in particular, our federal project here got federal dollars specifically earmarked for our project. And the most significant part of it is it's paid for at 100% federal cost share. So that $158 million does not require the county or the state to provide any funding assistance. Of course, we do have a cooperative agreement. We are still the local sponsor, so we do other kinds of in-kind services for the project, but it's really significant because that's a lot of money that's coming from the federal government. So I want to tell you a little bit about what they're doing with that. Let me move my little Zoom screen over a little bit so I can see the slide a little better. So with that money, they divided it up into a series of different projects. The first project they tackled was the Surfside Truck Haul. And the term truck haul is significant. When I started at DERM 30 years ago, the sand used to come from offshore. These big dredges would go offshore and dredge the sand up from the sea bottom and bring it to, bring it to the shoreline. What's happened, I'm trying to turn these things off. I don't know why they're even ringing. I thought I had them turned off. It would pump the sand to the shoreline. What's happened in the intervening decades is we've run out of this easily reachable sand in our offshore areas. So now the sand comes via truck from the central part of the state. So it's a significantly different project when you're having to bring all these trucks in and put it on the beach, where before you could use these really large ships and go dredge it off and pump it right onto the shoreline. So Surfside project was approximately 330,000 cubic yards, and that was completed in February of this year. Then the next project they tackled were something called the Miami Beach hotspots. The hotspots are areas of the beach that have historically shown some level of erosion. And for any of you on the call that are familiar with the area around 27th, 29th Street, those breakwater structures were actually placed in the early 2000s specifically because that was an area that was vulnerable to continuous erosion. We were constantly trying to keep that area replenished with sand. It was a very difficult battle. And so this was an alternative approach. By putting those breakwaters, it helped stabilize the beach in that area. I understand from some of the residents south of there, their concern is that the beach south of there has stabilized narrower than it was historically. And that's part of what we're talking about now. What can we do to improve the width of the beach in that area? So as part of the truck haul projects, there were 4 different projects, 68th Street to 60th Street, 55th to 53rd, 47th to 44th, and the 27th to 29th Street area down to approximately 26th Street. So those 4 projects, those were all done completely by the federal government, funded by the federal government, planned for, contracted, and completed by the federal government. We sort of stand, in support of them as the local sponsor. We would get them any access agreements that are needed for getting to the beach. We would certify access for the lands. We also would help get the permitting for those projects. Those projects were just completed at the end of May. I know some of the folks in that area are concerned about what the beach looks like today. Keep in mind the project was just completed, and it almost immediately starts going through transformation where the wave energy is already starting to act upon it, and it's already going to start to change its shape over time. The next significant project we've got coming is the Sunny Isles Renourishment project. That's slated to be working in January of 2021. I'm sorry, Val Harbor is the next one. That'll be the third project, supplement number C. That's going to be approximately 200,000 cubic yards, and it's going to be a combination of getting sand from the shoals that are formed on the inside and the outside of the inlet, and whatever sand they don't get from that, they'll truck it in from Central Florida. The Sunny Isles project, and that Val Harbor project is going to be starting in February 2021. The Sunny Isles Renourishment project is going to be about 300,000 cubic yards with sand trucked in from Central Florida. That's looking to start sometime in January of 21. And then the more significant project, I mentioned this hotspot. The hotspots are kind of like touch-ups that were done sooner rather than later to make sure that the beach is stabilized for the upcoming seasons, the hurricane seasons that we've got coming. But with this $158 million that the Corps has, they are going to be doing a larger project, 600,000 cubic yards across all of Miami Beach. And that'll include the areas immediately adjacent to these hotspots and part of these hotspots they just completed. So there's a larger project coming in the fall of 2021 that will help put sand in those areas that are immediately south of the hotspot project that just got completed. The other thing I want to mention are the breakwaters, and we understand the concern with the potential for the shoreline to accumulate sargassum seaweed that's washing in from the Caribbean. This is a phenomenon that's occurring all over the Caribbean basin, Mexico, the Yucatan. It's actually really quite bad certain times of the year. We are at any point in time, we could be vulnerable to that because these large mats of this seaweed are accumulating out into the Caribbean basin. They could, based on weather, they could wash ashore. And what we want to make sure of is that this particular part of the beach isn't any more susceptible than other parts of the beach. So we're doing a project that is not a federal project. It's a county project through my agency and my staff. We're going to be doing a truck haul project to add additional sand in between and around those little breakwater structures in order to make them less susceptible to the accumulation of sargassum. We don't know what the season is going to be like. It could be, a bad season for sargassum, which at some point could impact the entire 13 miles of beach. But at least in these areas, we want to make sure we're doing our part to minimize the likelihood that there'll be areas of accumulation. I know the Parks Department also has a program to actively manage sargassum. They do a phenomenal job day in and day out with their staff, keeping our beaches beautiful. So the construction for that project, we hope will start in late August, early September. We are working with the state regulatory agencies to get permission for that. We do need permits from the state of Florida and also the Army Corps of Engineers, their regulatory branch. And we thought we were going to get sort of the short version of the permit, a field permit, but they indicated they'd like us to modify the existing permit. So we're working through that process now. We've already made that application. We also are aware of some sea turtle nests that have already been in the ground prior to our contacting the state for permission. Those nests will have to be left undisturbed for approximately 70 to 80 days. So that's going to limit when we'd be able to start that project. That time clock is, I guess, from about a week or so ago, a week or 2 weeks ago. So we're looking to get this project done as soon as possible based on getting permission from the state of Florida. The last thing I want to mention is that beach renourishment is never really over. It's one of those things that's an ongoing process. I mentioned earlier, I've spent 30 years working at the county at DERM, and when I started, my job was working on the Beach Renourishment program. My assignment has changed over time. I have a much broader level of responsibility, but my heart's always been involved with the beach program, and it's a never-ending process. Because beaches are so dynamic, they're always vulnerable to storms and erosions. Once we chose to occupy those barrier islands with significant infrastructure, we have an obligation to see that they're protected. And the way to protect them is to build wide, healthy beaches that have good dune systems and to continue to renourish those beaches. And so we're always looking at the status of the beach. We're looking at areas that are eroding and coming up with new projects. We're doing surveys every couple of years. We're coordinating with our folks in the Parks and Recreation Open Space Department. They do a fantastic job of looking for sea turtle nests every morning before they go out and do maintenance, and they do a tremendous job doing maintenance on the beaches. So with that, I guess I will turn it over to the next speaker.
I think maybe we'll turn it over to Parks, Maria or Tom or Mark, just to talk about, since the hotspot, Lee sort of talked, I think for most of you, the neighborhood we're talking about, we just finished the hotspot project. The next thing is fill in those horseshoes for you here locally between the breakwaters, and then the bigger Army Corps project, which finishes all of the beach renourishment south of 27th. It'll be coming next year. But in the meantime, in the area where we just renourished the beach, you're probably seeing some little escarpments as the sand begins to settle. And so I think Maria or Tom or Mark can kind of give us a little update as to how we manage that as our beautiful new sand settles into its new place in the world.
Sure, absolutely. I before I get started, and thank you, Lee, that was a great presentation. I see there's a question that has come in. So before we go into that, what is the cost of the breakers that will be constructed to avoid accumulation of the sargassum along the shore?
So I think they're referring to the sand. What we're planning on doing is placing additional sand in those areas. And I've got the head of my beach program, Marina. I don't know if you have cost estimates yet, Marina, on the amount of sand that is going to be needed in order to touch those areas up.
Yes, Lee, we're estimating approximately 10 to 15,000 cubic yards. So from a cost point of view, that would be around $600,000 or $700,000.
Okay, very good. So thank you again. And we'll try to start first by saying that, and I'll get to Commissioner Higgins's comment regarding how are we dealing with escarpments. So first, know that our strategy in terms of addressing seaweed along the beach has not changed since last year, where we decided to do an adaptive management strategy in cleaning the beach. So what that means is we evaluated the beach and identified what Lee referred to as the hot spots, which are areas where we have just jetties, breakwaters, man-made interventions that can be addressed by the removal of seaweed. So as you all know, we've contracted with beach rakers, and they're going in there, and I think they're doing a great job of removing, literally removing the seaweed from those areas. As you learned from Lee's presentation, there are those areas that the county are going to be going back to and straightening out that edge from the glove to a straight edge so that we minimize the accumulation of seaweed in those areas. In addition to that, we are going to continue to cleaning and removing the seaweed once it lands on shore, as we have done with our, the beach crew has been doing an amazing job. Just go in there and blade the seaweed into the sand and continue the progress that I know many of you saw last year. And I think we were very successful in just dramatically turning things around for all residents in the area. One thing that, that I've seen quite a lot of images is seaweed in the water. And just so you all know, right now, that is something that, from a parks perspective, of course, we don't have, jurisdiction over waters. And I think also from an environmental perspective, it poses to be very challenging in terms of how to manage seaweed while it's in the water. One thing that we are doing is we have teamed up with the University of Miami in doing a study where they're tracking seaweed as a way for us to be able to anticipate and learn from the science as to what we can expect and how we can best prepare for it. It's, as part of many things that the community has to adapt to. I think, seeing a certain level of seaweed in the ocean is something we have to prepare to deal with on a regular basis. I know that we've prepared to do that, and that the with commissioners, help, the county and the mayor allocated funds for us to be able to remove seaweed from those hot areas, hot spots. So I'm going to turn it over to Tommy to speak specifically about the escarpments and how we're dealing with them. So we're sharing computers because he can't log on.
It says the meeting.
I'm sorry.
I'm locked by the host.
Oh, that's weird. I see you on, Tom.
I'm back. I was locked by the host. I can't get in my laptop. So anyway, regarding escarpments, any escarpment on the beach, whether it's all year round to include turtle nesting season, we have to request through DEP in order for permission to knock them down. So in order to do that, we have to make a request using the row number, plus pictures, measurements, how many feet, and then we submit that to DEP. Once DEP gives us permission, then we're allowed to bring the dozer on the beach, which is what they call a machine with a front-mounted blade to knock them down. So that's our opportunity to knock them down. Our last approval was in the areas around Hollover and the renourished areas, so we can knock them down. I think, as Lee mentioned, as part of the sand settling in, we're going to have some concerns come up in those areas periodically. So we're prepared to knock them down. We also have to do our nesting surveys in the morning, and then before we go back and do any work such as removing those scarps, we have the nesting crew again go through there to make sure no turtles were present that evening before. And then we can knock them down. So as we get them, we have to request them. We try to get turnaround within 72 hours. At times it's challenging, but we continue to ask and push to do the best job we can out there. The crew is very good at what they do. They're very skilled at what they do. And we think they do a good job knocking them down. And as the director mentioned, also maintaining the beach maintenance regarding the seaweed and what we're allowed to do during certain times of the season.
Thanks, Maria and Tom. And just to reiterate, I will say, last year, as you remember, when we were applying to the state of Florida for our permits to remove seaweed, the response time was terrible. Sometimes we would go several weeks without a permit. When they would issue a permit, they would only issue it for one day. And thanks to Maria and Tom, we were able to bring the executive director of the Fish and Wildlife Commission here so he could see firsthand the care with which we maintain the beaches, our great turtle nesting program. And as a result, for the seaweed cleanup, we have a season-long permit. It's the first time in the history of the county that we can go out every morning and do that, as long as we don't disrupt the turtle nest. And then same thing, even this time, to kind of, as the sand settles, if we need to knock a little down and smooth it, they've given us a 1-month permit versus a 1-week permit. So I think our team is in good communication with the state, and that is working better, and they're beginning to understand that this beach is, first of all, people live near it, but second of all, it's part of our tourism economy, and we really do need it to be, to feel welcoming for folks that visit there. So to the Parks Department, thank you for getting up every morning at sunrise and cleaning the beach. And I do realize, sometimes in midday we get another high tide and we get more seaweed, but we're out there every morning, and the county has fully funded that operation. So the mayor's been very good about that. So thanks, everybody.
Great. So I think we have a few questions in the Q&A that I'm just gonna go through now, and then we'll go from there. So the first one that I see, Commissioner, would you like to discuss your mask?
Oh, yeah. So the question comes up, why do I wear a mask when I'm in the office? I mean, and I do it for a couple of reasons. One, there are other people here, not in the room with me, but they do come in and out, and sometimes unannounced. But I have a job where I'm out a lot in the community, and so I wear it just to protect others, just in case somehow I haven't washed my hands enough, and that they're just really protects other people. So it's a personal choice of mine. I wear it when I'm outside all the time, and I have a lot of cute ones. I've decided if I have to wear them, I may as well buy designs. But I do try when I'm in the office to wear them, to be respectful of the team.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner. The next question is from Charlotte. What is happening in terms of getting rid of the seaweed? Is it going to be sent back into the ocean or recycled? We don't want the same problem as last year, where it created sulfur gas that polluted the air, where people were getting stings and skin rashes from the seaweed. Parks, I believe you all would be best to answer this.
Yeah, in terms of the seaweed, we have, as the commissioner mentioned, where there are 5 hotspot areas that we have permission in which to remove the seaweed. So we have contracted out with Beach Raker, and they do a very good job at removing the seaweed within the time frame that we have allowed on the beach. In the other areas of the beach, we use the tractors with rear-mounted blades and we angle it, and we're allowed to blade the seaweed back into the sand. We're not allowed to put the blade in more than 2 inches in the sand by the state. That's a requirement. So there, as the commissioner mentioned, there's days where we're going to have, if we hit it on an outgoing tide, a lot of the seaweed will, the beach will look cleaner longer. If we're working on an incoming tide, there's just an abundance of it that comes in. So we only have a short opportunity to work on the beach. We have to go out after the turtle survey is completed. And then we also have to be cognizant of the number of people on the beach and how we can operate the machinery safely, so we don't put anyone in harm's way. Because the equipment is large, it can slide on the sand a little bit. It gets like ice out there some days. So we do the best we can within the guidelines that the state allows us to operate in.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Next question comes from James O'Neill. Will the grooming activity be resumed to mitigate the recurring seaweed buildup, which has now been exacerbated by the creation of a cove at 25th Street from the replenishment project?
Lee, I mean, is that it? That area is, I believe, outside of one of the hot spots. So from the park standpoint, we can continue to blade the seaweed in that area, in that particular location.
Okay, and follow up, how soon will the replenishment be restarted to mitigate, oh, is this the same one? Yes, no. Will to mitigate the newly created cove seaweed buildup health issues, will the area south of the breakwater at the Edition Hotel be included?
So as I mentioned, we're going to try to get that project done as soon as possible. We're already working with the state and the Corps on the required permits in order to be able to place sand in the vicinity, in between the breakwaters and on the ends of the breakwater. So I'm not sure exactly where the Edition Hotel is, but if it's the area that's between the southern breakwater and the new project, that's one of those areas I've instructed my staff to also include in the project. And so the time frame was, I think we're looking at some time in late August or early September because of the existing turtle nests that are there and the fact that we need permits from the Army Corps of Engineers and the state of Florida. It's a permit modification from the state, but a new permit from the Corps.
Okay. The next question, what was the cost during fiscal year 2020 associated with picking up the sargassum, and what is the amount estimated for fiscal year 2021?
Well, we have a contract approved for roughly $2 million for this fiscal year. Last year, we didn't spend that amount, but we started later in the season. So I'm anticipating spending up to that amount this year if we need to. The contract runs basically from March through the end of October. And then, like I said, we have a specific amount we have to, that we're allocated for. So we need to stick to that number at this time.
Okay, the next question is about the study. Can the scope of that study be shared with the community?
We can ask them. We can definitely ask them if we can make that available. Right now, they just submitted an application for a grant. So it is pending on the receipt of the grant in order to conduct the study.
Okay, so, and we, our office has also been involved in supporting that grant program. So as soon as we hear more, we can definitely share with the residents, with all of you who attended, with the Mid-Beach Neighborhood Association, once we learn more and we really see what that scope looks like. The next question is the Optical Oceanography Laboratory College of Marine Science satellite-based sargassum watch system being used to inform funding allocation for sargassum removal and blading.
A lot of the information we use off the University of South Florida's site, and they predict how much sargassum in the times we're going to receive it, and they've been accurate so far this year. Unfortunately, they hit the nail on the head when we were going to receive it. But yes, we do look at we do look at those factors when we request funding, and also on the areas in question that seem to accumulate the majority of the seaweed.
Okay, great. The next is just a comment. You know, there are concerns that seaweed's not being picked up past 26th Street heading south. And then another comment, we often get asked what the community can do to assist with sargassum.
Yeah, regarding not being picked up, we pick up in the 5 hotspot areas, and then we work with the tractors with the blades in the other areas, sometimes running 2 or 3 tractors at a time out there to do the best we can in the conditions. What the community can do to assist with sargassum, it's a difficult question to answer. Mother Nature seems to have the upper hand on us right now. An awareness of it helps. Notifying the public on what's occurring. I don't know, Lee, from your end, anything coming from the DERM angle?
Sure, I can probably give you maybe a philosophical answer. You know, we see a lot of changes around the planet. The Earth is sort of reacting to a changing environment, and there are, you know, warmer temperatures. There are nutrients that are washing off of the landscape in various places around the world, deforestation. So it's, if I could give you the big picture, we should be trying to minimize our impacts to air pollution in terms of greenhouse gases. We should minimize the use of nutrients that can actually wash off into the oceans and cause pollution that would fuel. And if we can get a hold of the warming temperatures, that should help, you know, reverse it. But it's a big challenge. It's really a global scale problem. These are enormous areas that are growing out in the middle of the Caribbean basin. So the concern is, I know right now we're talking about how do we better manage a particular area on the beach where we think, you know, it might have some vulnerability. But if you've seen what's happening in the Caribbean basin, some areas are completely overwhelmed, and we hope that doesn't happen here. And again, I have to laud the Parks Department for the work that they do every day to keep the beach. But it's possible for us to be overwhelmed by sargassum, not any particular street end. It could be all 13 miles in the worst case scenario. So I think addressing it at a more global scale is really the long-term solution. So thank you for letting me say that.
Well, and I also think a lot of times the issues we've been facing in trying to help you all keep the beaches clean are state issues and federal issues. And I don't think the state of Florida has begun to study sargassum because it's an algae, right? So we talk about red tide, which is an algae. We talk about the green gunky algae. Lee, you probably know the technical name for that. But sargassum is also an algae. And so I think with the help of University of Miami, we're beginning to get to feed up into Tallahassee that we would like sargassum to be studied. They have a task force on the red tide and the green algae. But sargassum is not yet part of that state study. So I would like to see that happen. So anytime you get a chance to see a state senator or a state rep, you may want to put that bug in their ear because, you know, we're not the only beaches that have this happening to us. It's Monroe County, it's Broward County, and by the way, it's all the way up to South Carolina. So I do think having larger groups rather than our, you know, I mean, we're not that small a county, but relative to the state of Florida, we are, if they can work on that, that will be helpful.
Great. Thank you both for that answer. The next question comes from Joe from Club Atlantis. South of 27th Street has been an erosion problem requiring refurbishment every 5 years. Any chance of getting breakwaters placed south of where they are now to help better preserve the beach and the natural barriers? This would also help with surges and erosion in this area. Thoughts?
So, thank you. So I'll take that question. So what we're doing is we're looking at having an engineering study done of the offshore areas, the bathymetry, to understand what causes those particular areas to become erosional hotspots. Now, the area where the breakwaters were actually were a significant erosional area that was impacting the dune. And since those breakwaters were installed, the area south of there has stabilized somewhat narrower than it was historically, and we understand that. So what we're looking at now is what can we do in order to put sand in those areas and have it stay for longer periods of time. There's the potential for doing offshore reef systems that are submerged. And so my staff are actually working with coastal engineering firms to do an analysis of the coastal dynamics to understand what is the real solution here. If it's more breakwaters, that's one approach, or is there another way to do it? Could we put some submerged coral reef systems out there that would help minimize the wave energy, or is there another technology that we can use so that when we put the sand down, it stays put? So we are looking at all of those.
Great. Thank you so much, Lee. Is the sargassum going to be removed or just bladed south of 27th Street, specifically 26th to 24th Street? When should we expect beach refurbishment?
So I can take the beach renourishment question. So as I mentioned, there's two aspects of it. We're going to do our touch-up that the county's going to do right at the breakwaters, hopefully get those done sometime in September, or get those done in September. The larger project, and I don't have it in front of me now, it was on the earlier screen, but it's, I think in, let me look at my notes here.
I have fall 2021.
Fall 2021. That's the 600,000 cubic yards project that the Army Corps is going to do across all of Miami Beach. That would go into that area as well.
Lee, can I ask you a question about that? How far in advance does the Army Corps start their public meeting process so that the residents can begin to, you know, just let them know what they're experiencing on a daily basis? Do they start 6 months in advance, a year in advance? When would we expect those?
I'm gonna pitch that question to Marina Blanco-Pop, who's head of my beach program there.
Yes, Lee, this is Marina. And Commissioner, they typically would do those public meetings in the period of maybe 3 to 4 months prior to the award and you know, notice to proceed.
Okay, so maybe April or May of next year.
That's what we're thinking at this point, yes.
All right, we'll keep an eye out.
Okay, and regarding the question of if we are removing seaweed on 27th Street, the answer is yes. The actual area where we're removing seaweed is 26th through 32nd. Those are the areas that have been identified as the hot spots.
Okay. Next question. The state task forces on other algae are developed and appointed by who? Would it be helpful for MBNA to coordinate a request for the development of a task force from the county and city governments, hotel and condominium properties, universities, and other stakeholders?
I don't know that that's the right makeup for the kind of studies that they're doing for the state, which doesn't mean that a lot of the folks listed shouldn't have input into this, but I think those task forces, correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, are really to look at the science driving behind this so we can figure out solutions. By the way, some of these solutions on sargassum might be at the national level because we may need international negotiations with what's going on with Brazil and the Caribbean and other places. So I think what, from my knowledge, they're much more scientific in nature. Lee, do you have more insights on that?
Yes, thank you. And so, you know, the state of Florida has the Blue-Green Algae Task Force, and that's looking at how the state of Florida is really affecting algae in our waters. Of course, everybody knows, you know, what happened over the last several years up in the center part of the state with the water coming off of the watershed in the middle part of the state going east and west, fouling up both coasts. And so the Blue-Green Algae Task Force was looking at that because that's more what Florida is contributing to it. The challenge with the sargassum, even though Florida is part of the Gulf and what may end up, you know, going out into the Gulf of Mexico and washing out in the Caribbean could help fuel this. Generally speaking, sargassum is arriving from other places. It's coming up into our area from the Caribbean basin. It isn't really generated as much here as it is brought here. So I think the task force would be looking at ways to manage it. And I think you pointed out very cleverly, Commissioner, that probably with all of us talking to our elected officials about the state's reaction to it, the state needs to be a little more agile when it comes to responding to communities that need to do something quickly to clean up our beaches. Whether they need more staffing that can quickly come out and say, yeah, it's okay, clean that up. Because, you know, we do, and I'm head of a regulatory agency, so I understand we do have to protect resources. At the same time, we live with people. and we need to make sure that the time frames of what we do matches the needs of our community. So we need to make decisions quickly so we can react to them quickly.
The only question we have left as of now, is it true that the seaweed is being removed? Because a lot of people think it's being shoveled back into the ocean. Would removing the rocks near Faina and south help with the seaweed buildup?
So I can take the question about removing of the breakwaters. So the challenge with removing the breakwaters is that it's going to leave that area of the beach vulnerable to erosion. And you know, the challenge with not having a wide beach is that at any moment you could have a storm or a hurricane that could severely impact all of the infrastructure we have on the land. You saw that in the Northeast with the hurricane, and I'm having a senior moment. The name of the hurricane that hit the Northeast up in New York. Some of those areas that didn't have well-developed dune systems, the storm went completely over the island and washed the homes off into the bays up there. So having a well-developed beach, not only is it good for the economy, which we all recognize, but mostly it's good to protect us from storm surge. So it wouldn't be recommended to remove the breakwaters. What we need to do is look for ways to keep them adequately renourished and look for other ways to keep them from eroding.
And just to reiterate what we discussed earlier, from 27th to 32nd, the seaweed is removed, literally removed. And anything, you know, that, the blading that happens in other areas is not necessarily, shoveling it back into the ocean. It is just kind of tilling it with the sand. But in those areas, 27th through 32nd, it is removed.
Okay, so Maria, I believe you just addressed this next question about removing the seaweed south of 27th. And then Anna Marie wrote, would it help to coordinate a request by obtaining written support from all of the stakeholders directed to the state? Who develops the task force? Does it come from the governor's office, etc.?
I think that the other algae task force they came as a legislative item through the State House and State Senate to be formed, although I do believe the governor would have the ability to form it from the top down. So there's two possible ways of making that happen. Next week, I'm pretty sure it's next week, we call it the up, down, and all around call, where all of us that sort of share geography, Senator Pizzo, Senator Rodriguez, Representative Duran, Representative Grieco, and I get together and we just talk about things that might be helpful for them to be talking about up in Tallahassee, and they let me know what it would be helpful for me to be talking about that would help them down here. So let me just pose that question to them to see whether or not that's something that one of them might be willing to take on as a legislative item. And then we can get back to you about that later.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. And then the last question is, why isn't the seaweed removed south of 27th?
So last year, we asked the city of Miami Beach to submit the places and do the surveys of where they wanted the county to remove. And so we are removing based on the submittals of hotspots that they submitted to us. And that's what we budgeted for. And, you know, certainly over time, if we feel as if we need to expand or subtract, right? If Mother Nature is nice to us, we can look at that. But last year, those were the spots that we received from the city of Miami Beach.
And once again, the spots do cover 27th. It's 26th through 32nd. So if the request is for additional, you know, that's something that can be looked at. But right now, from 26th through 32nd, seaweed is removed.
Great. Thank you so much, Maria. That seemed to be all of the questions that we had in the question and answer. So I think we will wrap up this session, Commissioner. And if anybody has any other questions that we didn't get to, please feel free to email me. I will put my email back in the chat again. And then Commissioner, I'll let you.
Yeah. Again, you know how to reach us if you have questions. And then I think probably like the next big piece of information will be for us to make sure you're informed of the dates of when we're going to try to work on the beach renourishment that fills in those horseshoes. So you'll be hearing from us later in the summer on that. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate you taking time out today.